ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। अनन्तसंसारसमुद्रतार नौकायिताभ्यां गुरुभक्तिदाभ्यां वैराग्यसाम्राज्यपूजनाभ्यां नमो नमः श्री गुरुपादुकाभ्याम्। अञ्जनानन्दनं वीरं जानकी शोकनाशनं कपीशमोक्षहन्तारं वन्दे लङ्काभयङ्करम्। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। यदङ्घ्रिपङ्केरुहरेणुलग्नं निपीयनीरं विमलान्तरङ्गः जानामि तत्त्वं निजमात्मरूपम्। जानामि तत्त्वं निजमात्मरूपम्। तं नौमि नारायणतीर्थमार्यं। तं नौमि नारायणतीर्थमार्यम्। Namaskaram, all of you. Welcome to the 51st session of Krishna Leela Tarangini. We will begin the Tarangam 7 introduction in the words of Narayana Tirtha through slokams 154 through 157 and with a great Gadyam 26 from Tirtha explaining how and why Sri Krishna teaches the Gopis the Atma Tattva to identify the supreme truth. This Atma Bodham that Tirtha uses 20 stanzas to highlight are the quintessence of Vedas. We will come to that after we listen to the introductory slokams and the Gadyam.
अथा अभिनीयते रासक्रीडाख्यं चरितं हरेः गोपी कदम्बसहित श्रीकृष्णागमनो वने तासां तत्त्वोपदेशश्च ताभि आनन्दताण्डवो यत्कृतं हरिणा सर्वं पुष्पवृष्टिसुरैः कृता हास्य ताण्डव संगीतैः गोपीनां चित्तरञ्जनो संगः कथितः त्वेवं सप्तमे अस्मिन् तरङ्गके अनेक जन्म सहस्र तपसा परितोषितः आविर्भूतस्य भगवान् तासां गोप्यां सुजन्मनि तत्र खलु वृन्दावने मन्दार पारिजात सन्तानकल्पक हरिचन्दनादि तत्र खलु वृन्दावने मन्दार पारिजात सन्तानकल्पक हरिचन्दनादि तरु वृन्दानन्दित सुख विकसारिका वृन्द आनन्दित वृन्द अरिन्दित नन्दनोद्याने समुत्पुल्लसारद मल्लिकादि मकरन्द परिमल लालसदया संचर चञ्चरीक जडात्कार नूपुररवैः विचित्रपद त्रिभक्तोद्गलित नानाविध विनोद निनाद ताल मृदंग संगीतादि कला विशेषैः अलक्षित अनेक कोटि वन देवता नाट्य रसोत्कटे कलिंद नंदिनी पुलिंद समुल्लसित ललित लवंग लतादि विविध लता भवने क्वापि क्वापि शारद चंद्र चंद्रिका संग विलसित मणिवालुका मुक्तिकसित मौक्तिकसित सिगता सुधारमणीय वेदिका जाले दिव्य विमान समारूढ़ सुर किन्नरादि वरवनिता गणेशु पश्यत्सु वर्षत्सु मुहुर्मुहु पारिजातादि दिव्य सुगंधि कुसुमानि भक्त संकल्प सिद्धिं आतन्वानो गोपरमणि नयनोत्पल आराधित मदन गोपालमूर्ति वासुदेवो वासुदेव गोपीभिः सह रासक्रीडा महोत्सवारम्भ सम्भ्रमचेत गोपीभिः सार्धम् आत्मतत्त्वम् उपदिशन्निदम् आत्मतत्त्वम् उपदिशन्निदम्
In the four slokams, Narayana Tirtha, as usual, gives an overview of this Tarangam 7. Tirtha says that an episode in Hari's life called Rasa Krida is now being enacted. Then he gives the introduction this way. Krishna enters the forest along with a bevy of gopis. Then follow Krishna's philosophical discourse addressed to them, which is then followed by his own performance of the Ananda Tandava, or a dance form, with them to the accompaniment of showering of flowers by the celestials. The Gadyam explains how Sri Krishna teaches the gopis the supreme truth. Under the background of Krishna's teaching, where he sits and how he does it, what are the accompaniments, etc., are detailed in the Gadyam, exquisite Gadyam by Sri Narayana Tirtha. And towards the end, Tirtha says, Vasudeva is like Manmata, as though the Manmata has taken the form of a cowherd boy. He is worshipped by the blue lotuses that were the eyes of the gopis, and in the process he is fulfilling the wishes of his devotees, and his mind eagerly bent on inaugurating the great festivity of Rasa Leela. And Geeta concludes the Gadyam saying, he says the following, instructing them on the truth concerning himself as Atma Tattva, that Jivan and Brahman are not different but one and the same. So that's the quintessence of these 20 stanzas that are to follow. But the highlight is the Atma Tattva is very simple, that the Jivan and Brahman are not different. Let us now listen to the slokams 158 and 159 and Geetam 60 before we go into the Atma Bodha of 20 stanzas.
Brahmanubhuti rasikayam Brahmanubhuti rasikam saure Vaglakshanam sudam Vaglakshanam Vaglakshanam sudam Bhuya pibantyo modante Bhuya pibantyo modante Krishna brahmanita brisham Nrityanstena tadgeetam gayam jo Rasamandale Madi tenobadittam advaitam anukuvanti advaitam anukuvanti manataha advaitam anukuvanti manataha Advayamakanditamashesha jagadadim Yatra cha jagatitayamastitamanante Advayamakanditamashesha jagadadim Yatra sa jagatitayamastitamanante Yatra vilayam punarupaiti mrudikumba Yatra bhavatarayata satyamiti mamo Yatra vilayam punarupaiti mrudikumba Yadvadavatarayata satyamiti mama Yaccha nija shakti yutamaikshrata purastat Yat punarabhut vikrita maikshata sutejam Yaccha kamabhut punaravekshata yadannam Jatamavadarayata satyamiti mama Yat punarabhuti vida purusha sariram Yat punarabhuti vida purusha sariram Yat tadanuvishya sakalam trividamasit Jivakalaya sakala saksha vikritam sat Tattvam avadarayati satyamiti mamam Annasalile abhavatamasitapite Pranamanasa parinate paramasukshme Vagavavadapyasitam alpa parinami Jyotiravadarayati satyamiti mamam Sakala Purusha Yesha Parichitta Tasu Vilayam Pratigatasu Chana Veda Tasu Tusumattam Anupashyati Tadittam Tattvam Avadarayati Satyamiti Mamo Ina Purusha Samarasatvam Upalabhya Swapasamaye swabhavinamakayigasyat Yatra vilayam samanuyati manadi Tattvam avadarayata satyamiti mamo Yatra madhupagritam Yatra madhupagritam Rupamiti vedat Chitrarasamekarsatam samadigamya Daivarasa vedami Veda jagadadim Tattvam avadarayata satyamiti mamo Yatra jaladam samarasatvam anuyata Tatprutagashesha sarito na viduremam Brahmani jananudinam samanuyata Tattvam avadarayata satyamiti mamo
Advayam akhanditam asesha jagadadim yatra cha jagattitayam astitam anante yatra vilayam punarupaiti mridi kumbho yad vadavadarayata satyamiti mam om. In this world, clay parts remain in the soil before they appeared. After appearing and disappearing, they are continuing to remain in the soil. Just like that, all the three worlds existed and exist in the essence of Sat, which is non-dual, formless, and infinite. Objects with name and form appearing and ceaselessly undergoing various transformations are not real, but they are all false. Therefore, Sat, the causal substance of these worlds, is the only true substance. And this is the meaning of Omkara. And Krishna says in the first stanza, not only is the meaning of Omkara, yes, this is my form, and this is what and how you will perceive me and my nature decisively, not as the cowherd boy. In the second stanza, Yacha nija shakti yutam aikshata purastad yat punarabud vikritam aikshata sutejaha yachakam abhut punaravikshata jedannam jatam avadharayata satyamiti mam om. Aikshata in this stanza means undertook the act of visualization. Existence is one only. There is no second. Sat is existence. It is subtle and without distinction. Sat is all pervasive. It is one and the only one, untainted, partless consciousness. At the time of deluge, the true substance known as Sat, which is the place where the souls of trillions of living beings with prior vasana are frozen, souls which take birth and death again and again and end up with pleasure and pain. This Sat intended to create fire first with its power of illusion and thus created the fire. Then, intending to create water out of fire, it created water. Then, becoming water, intending to create the earth from that point, created that too. The meaning of Omkara is the real substance called Sat, and you will therefore definitely feel that that is the form of my inference, and please do not think I am a cowherd. That is the amplification of the sloka for which you had a summarized meaning on the slide. As a matter of clarification, during the deluge, Lord Krishna has taught the gopis to realize themselves as they are as a means of liberation from shackles. So it is clear that humans are born again and again due to the absence of such awareness. Therefore, it should be known that this world has arisen in the true essence of Sat, and everything else is a perception, often a deception. Just as silver from the oyster shells, a twisted rope unto a snake, water from mirage, perceiving a thief from a bald tree in the dark although no human exists there in the darkness. It is our Maya, the Maya that we create when we do a perception without proper awareness or inference. That is the summary of stanza 2. Yat punarabhuti vida purusha sariram, yattadanu vishya sakalam trividamasi, jiva kalaya sakala saksha vikritam sat, tattvam avadarayata satyamiti mam om. The cosmic energy known as Sat was intended to make creation elaborate and grand. In fact, the above stanza from Tirtha is nothing but a summarization of sections 3, 4, and 5 of chapter 6 of Chandogya Upanishad. As I mentioned earlier, fire, water, and earth, which had previously been created because Sat decided to do so, they were divided each into two by Sat. In other words, Sat created Agni, water, and earth. Then it so thought that it has done the primary job, then it also thought it is time for me to divide these elements. So it divided each one of them into two. It divided each part of the body into two again. Later on, water and land added a quarter of these to the fire after one half. Fire joined a half of water and earth, a quarter of these. Then water with half of the land. The fire consumed a quarter of these amalgam. Therefore, the three creations, such as fire, water, and earth, became characteristics of the three elements of nature, which in turn created three types of bodies for living beings to live through. The calculations are arithmetic, which I explained, of the three elements created by Sat dividing into half and then having one quarter of that and one half of that added to the other element. And finally, fire taking over the remainder of the elements make it confusing unless we understand the examples. To elaborate that, human and animal bodies emerge from the flesh sac. This is Chandogya Upanishad. There are bodies that emerge from egg, snake, bird, etc. Plant vines that grow by splitting the ground is another form of bodies emerging. The Supreme Being called Sat, which created all these bodies, entered into those bodies, became active in each body, whether it is egg or a snake or a bird coming out of the egg, or the plant vines going from the seed into vines that grow by splitting the ground and coming out. Sat decided they have to be given life. Unless they become active in each body with the adulation of I, every element has to think of its I. Then only they attain vitality, and Sat claimed the name of Devadatta and Yajnadatta and the like. The other explanation is a child's body is seen in all the mirrors sitting in the middle of a beautiful room with many standing mirrors, well dressed and adorned in outfits. That is the way one should know that it is the essence known as Sat, because a myriad of the images come out of a single body. They did not or do not undergo any kind of change. It is the mind that perceives, or it is I who perceived them to be such. In the same way, when the essence of Sat enters any body, and when it is worshipped as the I, one that says that I am the God, whenever it appears to act, it remains only as a witness. You may call it observer or witness without any transformation. Such Sat is the meaning of Omkara. That's how Chandogya concludes this explanation of the bodies dividing, appearing, reappearing, and also like a mirage. So such Sat is the ultimate meaning of Omkara. And Krishna says, know certainly that it is my nature and it is that Omkara and that Sat is me. I am not the Adava by whom you see. The Sat word, which I often use here Sri Naranatita describes Trivut Karanam. The Trivut Karanam, or the method of the three elements of the land and water and fire, assuming the characteristics as detailed in Chandogya Samaveda. However, we should note that there are 5 elements or bhutas. In other words, 5 elements of bhutas, including the air and the ether, as the air and akasa are experienced by us both inside and outside of our body. Even though Naranatita explained the Tribhrut Karanam only highlighting on land, water and fire, he is very well aware that there are 5 elements of bhutas. Each of them should be accepted as characteristic of the Panchabhutas. The process by which each of the bhutas attains the character of the 5 elements is described in Chandogya. Each element must first be divided into 2 equal parts. Then 1/2 of each element should be divided into 4 parts. After that, add 1/8 aspect of the other 4 bhutas to half of each bhuta. Then every one of those bhutas is to attain the nature of the 5 individual bhutas or elements. This is known as Panchikarana. The first aspect which I talked about is a Trivutkarana made of only 3 bhutas. But the way I explained now that there are 5, when you include the air and akasha, air and the ether, then you apply this division, addition and subdivision. This process is known as Panchikarana. Sri Shankara Bhagavad Pada has written a short book on such Panchikarana. And Sureshwaracharya, the disciple of Bhagavad Pada, wrote a text called Vartika, or an explanation for the Panchikarana. And Naranatirtha, who was a great Manasika disciple of Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pada and his disciples, decided to write a text called Vivarana Deepika, a treatise on Panchikarana Vartika of Sureshwaracharya. This is the background because why Naranatirtha wrote, why he brought the summary into Krishna Leela Tarangini and put it through of Krishna while advising the Gopikas. This is the background. So Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pada writes the book on Panchikarana. Sureshwaracharya writes a text called Vartika to explain that. Sri Naranatirtha finally decides to write a Vivarana Deepika because an amplificatory treatise on Panchikarana Vartika of Sureshwara. It is an indisputable fact that the bhutas are of the nature of 5 elements, as we can see and feel the sound of the air and the sparsha of the air. In the fire, water and lands, the burning forest, the raging sea, the mountain with its rocky slopes. So thus you can understand why the division and why the perception of one element in the other. Here, although the Trivutkarana is explained using Samaveda, Tirtha seems to have felt an extreme solace by defining it in Panchikarana in the form of the Vivarana Deepika and as approved by the following Taittiriya. Let us now see the 4th stanza. Anna salile abhavat amasi tapite prana manasa parinate parama sukshme vagabhavadapyasatam alpa parinami jyotiriva dharayata satyamiti mam om. You saw the meaning on the slide, but let me give you an amplification because this is a little tricky. In order to satisfy our hunger, we eat hard food. We call it a hard food, not soft. because we cook grains like rice, wheat, gram, lentils, beans, etc., and almost make them soft and a little mushy. Then we eat them because we like to eat a hard food. Why? That's also defined in Upanishads. Why we eat hard food, how we soften it, everything is processed in Upanishads also. It's not as if we come up with explanations. We also drink water to quench the thirst that occurs in the body as soon as you eat hard food. You eat rice, wheat, gram, or lentils, beans after cooking them. And when the solid food goes or the hard food goes inside, automatically the body creates a feeling of thirst. In order to quench the thirst, you add water to the system. We also consume liquids such as butter, ghee, oil, etc., either directly or otherwise, derived from the milk of animals such as cows, buffaloes, goats, etc., for which Vedas gave a word. These are all denoted as Taijasa. Of course, Vedas have used Taijasa in multiple contexts and different meanings. And the context I'm talking about in this is the product that came from the animals, such as cows, buffaloes, and goats, namely the butter, which we turn into ghee by melting. That is known as Taijasa, the derivative of word Tejas. The fire in our belly cooks all of the above, whether it is a hard food, water, or oil, or ghee, or butter. That's why we call Jada Ragni. Thus, solid food, water, and oily stuff each undergo three transformations. When curd is churned, the first product that emanates from curd is butter. So, the three primary qualities of the above three substances come out independently. Among them, the first quality aspect of the hard foods we consume becomes the mind. So let's carefully analyze it. The primary quality aspect of the hard foods that we have consumed, that becomes the mind, thereby making the mind stronger so that it could think and act. The medium effect that comes out of eating food becomes flesh. In other words, the body gets the strength from it in a different form to so much of transformation. The third effect is the worst effect or necessary effect known as the excretion, that the waste is purged out. Similarly, the higher aspect of the water we drink becomes prana, it multiplies prana shakti. The middle aspect becomes blood, and of course, the leveling aspect, which is excreted, becomes urine. Thus, the highest aspect of the oil products consumed by us is vote. It strengthens the sound and awakening sense, etc. The middle aspect or effect that comes out of the consumption becomes the marrow, which really sustains the bone. The liquid inside the bone becomes a mushy substance. The worst aspect of the third element, namely oil or oily foods, is that the bone flows. So, earth, water, and fire created the spirit of life and spirit that are most helpful to man. Such bhutas were created by the essence of Sat. Such a Sat is a transcendental object. Realize that such a manifestation is also my form. So Krishna concludes in this particular stanza, Jyotirava dharayata satyamiti mam om. Why does he say that? He says, you have understood all the transformations of whatever you eat, whatever you drink, whatever you consume, how they are represented back through the body. But everything has been nothing but an essence of Sat, because I am in those bhutas and I created the bhutas and I made the element and I made those action. And such a Sat is a transcendental object, nothing but me. Please realize that such a manifestation is also my form, and thereby I am not simply a Yadava, not a boy that you see, but I am the transformed form and I am the basic element known as Sat. In the next sloka, we change the raga, and then this is the second batch of four stanzas. We saw the first four. Now the amplification becomes stronger in stanzas 5 to 8 in the words of Naranatirtha. In the fifth stanza, Shodasa Kalapurusha Yesha Parishishtaha Tasu Vilayam Prati Gatasu Naja Veda Tasu tu Samastam Anupashyati Tadiddam Tattvam Avadharayata Satyamiti Mam Om. Beyond the meaning that is stated in the slide representing the chapter 6, section 7 of Chandogya Upanishad, the amplification is very significant here. Swetaketu wondered how to know that the hard food that we eat becomes mind and the water that we drink becomes prana. Not only that we are confused, Swetaketu, who is an evolved soul, he himself gets confused. So he starts asking his father, sage Uddalaka, the question, because he wonders how the hard food becomes mind, how water we drink becomes prana, and how the body is able to do such transformation. To remove the doubt, sage Uddalaka says to Swetaketu, "O my son, the mind has attained the 16 aspects of power acquired through Anna. That is why Jivatman is called a Shodasha Kalan. In other words, one that can interpret and have 16 types of arts or the ability to perceive, classify, assimilate, and act. These are known as Shodasha Kala, and thereby Jivatman is also known as Shodasha Kalan. If you want to know the rationale behind this truth, do not take food, meaning solid food, for 15 days. So Sage Uddalaka says, if you want to understand the rationale without my having to explain it in a very high philosophical method, let me give you a mundane example, a simple example where you yourself will come up with the meaning. Don't take solid food for 15 days from today. Drink only water. Come and see me on the 16th day. Swetaketu therefore obeyed the father and drank only water for 15 days, and on the 16th day, starving and exhausted, came back to sage Uddalaka. The sage said to the son, "Hey Kumara, now recite the Vedas. I'm sure you've been only taking water and not any hard food." "Yes, father." "Then, okay, now recite the Vedas." The son was drawing a blank. He couldn't remember anything. And he said no scriptures appeared in his mind and he doesn't know how to recite them. This Svetaketu had already learned Vedas from Uddalaka, such an evolved soul. He was only observing Upavasam, meaning only water and no solid food. And the effect was, Svetaketu was not able to recite any of these Vedas. Then the father says, Svetaketu, now know that out of the power of 16 aspects in your mind, 15 aspects have completely perished. Out of this Shodasa Kala, or the 16 aspects, 15 of them have perished. And therefore, you are unable to remember any of them or recite any of the Vedas. The only aspect that still remain in your body is prana or life. You are holding on to that. The body holds on to the life or prana because you are still drinking water. The only thing that remains is prana, which is holding up the body. So Uddalaka cautions him, now you are going to eat, but you know how you should eat? I'm going to give you an example. Follow that example before you start eating. We don't put big logs of firewood in a small ember of fire where you see the fire exists, but in a very minuscule manner as embers. You only steadily arouse the fire by feeding first some leaves, dry leaves, wood fiber, small firewood particles, very small figs, and then start rekindling with a little bit of air and slowly blow it up and make the fire big. When the fire starts consuming everything in big, then you start adding big logs of food. The same process you need to do now to your body. Rekindle the only remaining aspect of Anna Shakti in you, because in the mind, there is willingness to get the other Shaktis to be re-evolved, but you only have prana. In order to come back to that original state when you are bright and ready to recite Vedas, starts consuming small amounts of Anna, little by little, to regain strength and all other faculties which will come back to you. When your mind will gain the full power once again, when the body becomes stronger. Svetaketu re-energized himself as his father told him and returned to him with a very strong heart. The sage then ordered him to recite the Vedas. Spontaneously, immediately, without any hesitation, Swetaketu recited the Vedas aloud and with impeccable swaras. Sage Uddalaka said, Hey Kumara, when you are starving and surviving with just water, the Vedas did not come to your mind because your mind was blank. And when you were totally famished and powerless, no other faculties was helping you. But after bolstering yourself with Anna, which is nothing but prana, you are slowly accentuating your prana and enhancing it and making the energy bigger and bigger. The Anna helps you to gain yourself back all the Shodasakala. And you got strong. The Vedas reappeared with vigor and power in your mind. Know therefore that mind is Annamaya and Sat is the originator of that Anna and Sat is the meaning of Omkara. And Krishna says, therefore, my form is Sat and Omkara. O Gopis, I am not a Yadava. Shodashakala Purusha Yesha Parichittaha Tasu Vilayam Prati Gatasu Nacha Veda Tasu tu Samastam Anupashyati Tadiddam Tattvam Avadharayata Satyamiti Mamom. Remember that I am that Om. Remember that I am the Sat. And remember, I am everything. Then goes to the next stage. Yena Purushas Samarasatvam Upalabhya Swapa Samas Yestvamapi Namaka Yehasyat. Yatra vilayam samanuyati mana adi tattvam avadharayata satyamiti mamu. Ever present, omnipresent, resplendent, blissfully formless, non-dual. The Supreme Brahman is the only real substance. All others are subject to decay and a myth or mirage. The real essence is called Sat by Upanishad. Such essence of Sat is the true self of all living beings. Hunger, thirst, death, and superfine or deep sleep are the four stages that are well understood and familiar to all mortals. Why? I'll explain. If a knowledgeable person examines these four stages or four aspects carefully, all of them will be well understood. The hard food we consume burns with the agni in our stomach. It gets converted into rasam by the water, and the water makes it liquidy, and then everything is made soft. It is no longer hard, but at least it's non-hard. Then we need replenishment of hard food because we have already diluted the hard food into rasam. So we start replenishing. The need to replenish hard food is felt and known as hunger. That's a step one of understanding. Keeping this as evidence, one must realize the fact that even hard soil is destroyed by water. We know when you do the gardening, we start bringing hard soil, but when you pour water, when this water soaks in and soaks in and soaks in, hard soil also is no longer hard. In this way, even the water we drank is made extinct by the fire in our stomach. So there are multiple effects happening. Hard food is converted into liquidy food, but that's also being burnt in the stomach. Then we want to replenish the last water because that was the cause of diluting the hard food into soft food. The second element that we feel is known as thirst, the need to have more water. Taking this as a proof, one should realize the fact that what the fire does without water. When we are involved in worldly things with body, life, senses, and the mind, and it is the state of Jagrat. I told you about the four states I am going to explain. The result of Annamaya. When we are very conscious and sharp, and senses and mind and everything is relatively sharp, it is the state of Jagrat. After the body and the senses are at rest, with the mind alone, engaging in things frozen within it, it reaches the state of Swapna or dream. In other words, we had good food, everything else is in place, the mind is alert and whatnot, but it also requires a little bit of rest. We start into the Swapna mode. The state that occurs after everything from the body to the mind is at rest is known as Sushupti. Swapna is the stage before Sushupti. Sushupti is deep sleep because in the earlier stage, namely Swapna, why we call it Swapna? the sleep is not really firm. There's a lot of thoughts going on. We don't know whether they are real or they are dreams. But the real sleep is the Shushupti or a deep sleep. When the mind is completely at rest, it's not frittering anymore. After we wake up, we get a feeling, well, I have slept soundly without worrying about anything. In this state of consciousness, our comfortable form, which should be Sat, exists together with Ajnana. Remember, in this particular state of Shushupti, when we feel so comfortable, that's the form which gives you the Sat or the idea of Sat. But because that exists together with Ajnana, which is the cause of all our suffering. Such Ajnana, even though ancient, is destroyed the moment the consciousness realizes that the pure Sat is the ultimate Brahman. So that from the Shushupti state, where you still have Sat clouded by Ajnana, you reach the final stage by your consciousness, understanding and awareness when Sat becomes the ultimate Brahman and your realization step in, I am that Sat because I am that Brahman and Brahman is me. O Gopis, remember this sutra. In Shushupti, the frozen jivas remain in Sat, and that is my Swarupa. And remember then, that is your Atma Swarupa. Well, then the Gopis start getting confused and they start asking questions. From stanza 7 onwards, you will see occasionally Gopis also raising questions, and the answers that Narayana Tirtha has embedded in stanzas 7 through 20 are as though Gopis have raised questions and Krishna is answering them for the questions that have come up from them. Yatra madhu pakritam dhupamidam etat chitra rasa meka rasatam samadigamya naiva rasa bedamiha veda jagadadim tattvam avadarayata satyamiti mamom. This is the question from the Gopis. Gopis are asking Krishna, hey Krishna, thousands of mortals participate in a mass gathering. Each of those mortals feels well that they are lucky to be part of that gathering, like what we all are doing now. We are in a gathering to enjoy you. Similarly, in the realm of Shushupti, the congregating living beings such as Devas, Gandharvas, Kinnaras, Kimpurushas, Pitrus, humans, cows, birds, reptiles, worms, name all the creation, are not seen as sentient beings. They are not seen such as though they are united in the form of Sat. They all are different. They all are independent. We can see reptiles and worms and birds and cows and humans and the elevated people like namely Pitrus and Kimpurushas, Kinnaras, Gandharvas, and finally Devas in the hierarchy. We don't see them as sentient beings. If they are, they would have been united in the form of Sat. So therefore the Gopis were wondering aloud how they should comprehend or how they could comprehend or know that they were also part of Sat while in Shushupti. Because according to Gopis, when I am in Shushupti, I am in complete sleep, deep sleep. I have no clarity, nothing, no disturbance. I am not conscious. In that case, why do I think I am part of Sat? And how do I think I am part of Sat? It's a very profound question for which Krishna answers the way I just now quoted the stanza 7. The summary of Krishna's quotation, the honeybees, in order to produce and consume the sweet honey which they created, begin collecting pollen and essence from various flowers such as mango flowers, neem flower, in Tamil we call nunapu or noni fruit flower. The fruits are sour and the flowers almost mimic jasmine. So honeybees go to nunapu also as though they are going to jasmine. They go to jasmine as well. Jasmine is original, nunapu is like a mimicry. But they pick up pollen and essence from Jati Malli, that is Spanish jasmine, Shanbagam, that is magnolia, lotus, that's Tamarai, even Yerkambu, Calotropis, and Tarambu, the Ketiki flower. Practically every flower that's available, the bees go and dip in and take the pollen and essence, but transform them into a uniform, textured, mellow, sweet honeycomb full of sweet honey and pack them up in a honeycomb. Just like no one can categorically separate or even decipher the origin of the honeycomb and which flowers are the originators of that composite honeycomb, it is impossible to decipher after the bodies of the mortals perish and the minds and souls merge into the blissful Sat. As to the composition of that Atman, some of you may stop me here, or you have question in your mind. Sir, we have seen honey being labeled saying this is from the rose flowers, this is from the forest of XYZ flowers only. Yes, their understanding is since they had the honeycomb inside that specific forest with conditioned flowers, no other flowers mixing up there in that forest, they presume that the honeybees, which are all there in the hives, only go around those flowers and pick and make their honeycomb exclusively. They may say, or they can say, predominantly that of such and such flower, but they can never categorically say, these honey created by the honeycomb in this forest, even though dominantly with all these kind of flowers only, are only from those flowers. Because nobody can stop a honeybee going around the world, going to the other flowers, picking the pollen and bringing it, and metamorphosizing all of them into the honeycomb of a uniform viscous flow. That is precisely the same effect here. It is impossible to decipher after the bodies of the mortals perishing and the minds and souls merging into the blissful Sat as to the exact composition of that Atman. It is also not possible for ordinary mortals to comprehend that I am within you and you are all inside me. Therefore, without doubt, know yourself decisely this minute as of myself, the cause of the universe, the substantial substance, and the supreme substance called Sat, and you will feel the Sat in you. When you decisively think, yes, this Krishna standing in front of me is the Sat, is the Omkara, then your confusion will be resolved. You will become part of me. You have to think, and you got to get yourself absorbed into me. In that set, he uses this 8th stanza, the last one in that group. Yatra jaladau samarasatto manu yataha tat prutagasesha sarito na vidurevam brahmani jana anudinam samanu yataha tattvam avadharayata satyamidi mam om. The gopis were not convinced with the prior explanation of honey being picked from all the pollen from different flowers and made into a homogenized uniform honey as the example that is relevant as all gopis merging into Sat and feeling the Sat. They said, Krishna, in this mundane world, if one sleeps at night in his own house and wakes up in the next morning and goes to a neighboring village or someone else, he still remembers that he was sleeping in his house the night before. Yes, sir, no, Krishna. If I slept in my home, came off to Vrindavanam to see you, if somebody asked me, what did you do last night? I slept in my home. So I'm able to definitely, clearly say I slept in that place. In the same way, Krishna, please explain why a mortal Jivatman does not realize that he was united in the last night with Sat when the Jivatman wakes up. If you say in Shushupti we should be able to feel oneness with Sat. Yes, we were in Shushupti, in that state, in that home. When I wake up, I should feel that I am the Jivatman because I was with Sat, right? Why is it that it's not happening? Krishna gives another example. That's the example which I just narrated. The summary of that is, the clouds take the water from the seas and oceans and pour them as rains over the mountains like Himadri, Sahyadri, etc., etc. Yatra jaladau samarasattvam yataha tat prutagasesha sarito na vidurevam. From those mountains originate the great rivers such as Ganga, Yamuna, Kaveri, and flow for thousands of miles for eons and eons and finally flow back unto the sea or oceans. See the transformation. The clouds take the water from all the seas and oceans, salty oceans, and they just move around. pour them as pure rain with no salt over the mountains like Himalayas, ranges, Sahyadri and all that. And from those mountains originate great water and great rivers, which transform into Ganga, Yamuna, Kaveri, and name all the Jivanadis, all the rivers. And then they flow for thousands of miles, even though they flow on the rock and dirt and all kinds of things. Finally, they still have that sweet water that the mountains emanated into rivers. But all of them flow, not only for eons, thousands and millions of years, finally they flow back to the sea or oceans. And the minute they get into that, they become saltwater again. So those rivers, after mixing up with the sea, they lose their name. You go to the sea or ocean where all these, you go to Ganges, Brahmaputra, and all other tributaries, when they go to the estuaries and then go into Bay of Bengal, take a handful of water, start drinking it. It is still salty. But the way they came in, they were sweet water. But can you ever say in your hand whether you're holding Ganga Jalam or Brahmaputra Jalam or what? The sweet water became salt, a single salty ocean. After emerging from the hills of Himadri and Sahyadri, and before joining the sea or ocean, the rivers, all the rivers remained in actuality independent water systems. Similarly, the mind, the senses, and body are all there to perform miracles even after awakening from Shushupti and before going back to Shushupti. The transformation between one Shushupti to the other Shushupti is the Maya that creates a lot of apparent miracles when your minds, senses, and bodies create all kinds of illusions. You don't understand, but you are between one Shushupti to the other. Just like pure water goes up in clouds, go to the mountains, become the Jivanadis, bring sweet water again, and they go back to the ocean and dump, and the water becomes salt. Look at this transformation. In Shushupti, you were with Sat. Then you wake up and you start really messing around with all your senses and going in wrong directions because you are not aware, you don't understand me. When you go back to Shushupti, you don't know what happened between these two periods of Shushupti. Hence, the lack of self-realization that Jivatman merged with Sid is not understood by you. That's why you are not understanding it. Therefore, if you know me as the essence of Omkara, I am creating this, I am the Sushupti, I am the Sat, I am also creating illusion into you, but focus on me, surrender unto me, the illusion goes away. You can understand Sushupti, you are part of Sat, you are part of Omkara, and that's me, and I am the supreme essence of real Sat, and that is your form also. That's how Krishna concludes the second part. God willing, we will take up stanza 9 to 20 in our next session because they are as interesting, if not more interesting, than these 8 stanzas which we happen to see right now.
Narayana, 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 Hare Krishna.